What's good, everybody? Good. All right. Sweet. I love the enthusiasm. I love the energy. Let's see. Housekeeping. I got some housekeeping tips for everybody. This is a safe space. Everybody is welcome. I have my own sort of little bit of a code of conduct. If you're a jerk, the door is right there, and I will not lose sleep over you leaving this talk. Bye. See ya. Questions? If hopefully everybody is on Twitter. I hope, because I actually have to split after this talk and get to the airport, so I'm not going to have a whole lot of time to stick around and chat and BS and do the hallway track, because hallway tracks are where the relationships are made. So hit me up on Twitter. I might have a chance for a couple questions out there, but that might be it. So I think that's all I have. Also, I am a huge accessibility advocate. I love CSS. I talk a lot about CSS, but I talk a lot about web accessibility. I travel all around the world to talk about web accessibility. So this might be a little bit of an interactive talk. Well, it's not going to be a little bit. It is going to be an interactive talk. So if I ask a question and you can't raise your hand, don't feel obligated to raise your hand. Are we savvy with that? Sweet. How many are local here to Florida? Damn, so most of the room. Holy shit. Wow. That's cool. Who has seen me give a talk before? Okay, sweet. So you kind of know the flow of how I do things. I'm trying to cut down on the swearing. So I dropped an S-bomb, but I won't drop any F-bombs. Try to keep it to a minimum. How many people are here for the first time? How do you like it so far? Yeah. It's a dope event, right? They put on an amazing, amazing event. This is my third year. We didn't have one in 2020 because shit hit the fan. We didn't have one last year. So this year, we're finally all back in one place, which is really awesome. So huge, huge shout out to Code on the Beach. If you see anybody that is here, that is working for Code on the Beach, volunteers, organizers, give them a thank you. Shake their hand, do an elbow, whatever you got to do, right? They put hard work in, they bust their ass, and that goes for anybody that puts together an event. I used to help run events in Detroit. I ran meetups. That is hard to do, because the one thing you need to make it happen is money. So, with that being said, thank your sponsors. If it wasn't for sponsors, we wouldn't have events. Now, I know everybody likes going by sponsors and just grabbing all the stuff on their table, throwing it in a bag, but just don't grab that stuff and walk away. You know, if they start having conversations with you, chit-chat for a bit, but tell them thank you. Because if it wasn't for any of them, none of us would be here. This event wouldn't happen, right? I think this is the official hashtag of the event, Code on the Beach, hashtag Code on the Beach. I think it might be COTB 2022. I don't know. I've always used Code on the Beach. So hopefully if you are on Twitter and you're doing the Twitter thing, which, how many are on Twitter? Oh.
You should come to my talk next about how to use Twitter.
Speaking of first words, talk about the sugar.
Make sure you go to Taylor's talk. I was hoping all of you would be on Twitter, but for everybody that is on Twitter, hashtag Code on the Beach when you're tweeting and taking pictures and the such. If you could also throw this hashtag on as well, hashtag developer community. I am not here just for fun, for one. I am here because of you and you and you in the back. The developer community makes me tick, right? Y'all are my lifeblood. I love to speak, I love to teach, I love to mentor, I love to drop knowledge. And if you got some knowledge you want to drop on me, that's cool. I might know some stuff that you might not know. You might know some stuff that I don't know, right? I appreciate every single one of you. Like I said, you can crack jokes on me. I'll probably crack some jokes through this. There is going to be one coming up, and if you don't like it, the exit's there. But yeah, developer community, y'all are my lifeblood. So I appreciate every single one of you being here, because next to the sponsors, all of you are the ones that make this happen. My name is Chris. I am Salt and Burnham on Twitter, right there. I'm a senior UI engineer at Rocket Mortgage in Detroit. I'm from Detroit. My birthday is also 313, so everybody kind of calls me Mr. Detroit. I also have it tattooed on the back of my neck. I hold recognitions in these different things right here. GDE expert, or Google Developer Expert in Web Technologies. I'm also a Microsoft MVP, Auth0 Ambassador, part of the Progress Ninja program, and a Media Developer Expert with Cloudinary. So with that being said, I want to ask a couple more questions here. So does anybody understand the Salt and Burnham reference? Is anybody a fan of Supernatural? There you go. I love Supernatural, so that's where that comes from. So if you're a fan of Supernatural, you're good in my book. What about Buffy? Anybody like Buffy? This is a safe space. You can admit things in here. It's cool. Trust me. I love Buffy. What about Charmed? Old Charmed or new Charmed? Old Charmed for sure. All right, this one gets everybody, because everybody's like, oh, Buffy, well, whatever, Supernatural, Stranger Things.
Oh, yeah.
There you go. There you go. So who thinks Eddie's really dead?
He's not.
You think?
I haven't seen it, man. You spoiled it.
Sorry, bro. You're SOL. Spoiler's been out for a minute. Eddie dies. We think. We don't know. I am excited for season 5, though. The Duffer Brothers said they are fast-forwarding the timeline, so it's going to take place in the 90s. The kids are going to be older. So we'll see how that pans out. A little bit about me. I love spooky shit. I love horror. I have multiple horror things in my house. I have multiple horror tattoos. So who's a fan of horror movies? Sweet. So if you don't even care about this talk and you want to vibe on horror movies, let me know. Super stoked for Halloween Ends. Has anybody seen the trailer for that? Halloween Ends. You got to watch it. I believe both Laurie and Michael are going to die, and that will end the franchise entirely. That's just my opinion. I also believe in these 3 things. Anybody believe in Bigfoot? Hell yeah, cryptozoology in the house. What about?
How about Mandela effects?
All that shit.
They just shut off CERN July 5th. You might be seeing more of them.
What about ghosts? Anybody believe in ghosts? I do. I used to be in a paranormal research group in Michigan years ago. What about UFOs? All right. Did you know UFOs built the pyramids?
I did.
Do some research. Do some research. Do you believe in ghost Bigfoots that are UFOs?
Do your research.
Do your research. Do your research. Hashtag do your research. But I believe in all this stuff too. So that's just a little bit about me. I also love CSS. Like I said, I do a handful of different talks on CSS. I love CSS. I'm a CSS purist. I write vanilla CSS with Sass, the SCSS extension. I love CSS. If you don't love CSS, I hope you're going to love CSS. Once you leave this talk, it's a lot of CSS. But I'm also in accessibility, which also has CSS in the middle of it. I'm also a huge accessibility advocate as well. And I also do talks that pair accessibility and CSS together. So if you ever get a chance to see those talks on the road, that'd be sweet. I will be in Louisville here in a couple weeks. I will be driving up to Grand Rapids, Michigan for Beer City Code. So if you like beer and you want to go to that, go to Grand Rapids. Is anybody going to Kansas City Developer Conference, KCDC? The best conference in the Midwest. You should definitely go to that. That's an amazing event. The organizers, they bring people in from all over the world for that one. I'm just going to be doing accessibility talks most of the rest of the year. And I'll also be in London, England in November for a really, really big event. Some things I want to cover real quick that aren't going to be in this talk. CSS and JS is not going to be in this talk. I don't write CSS and JS. I think this is an anti-pattern to the modern web. I think this is an anti-pattern to the pure web. So this isn't going to cover CSS and JS. This also is not going to cover styled components. Anybody use CSS and JS for styled components? Then you're in the right talk. I'm not knocking anybody that does this stuff. It's not for me. I think it's more of a pain in the ass than it needs to be. CSS modules, on the other hand, CSS modules are great. It's vanilla CSS. You can scope it to a component, especially if you're writing Sass. It's awesome. And the one thing I am not ever going to talk about is Tailwind. So if you don't like anything I just said, I'll turn my back. The exit is right there. I'll give you 5 seconds to walk out. Todd, sit your ass down. Yeah, we're not going to cover Tailwind in this talk at all. I don't do that. Everybody cool with that? Sweet. thank you all for coming to It Came From the Browser. If you didn't get the gist, this is a little bit of a horror theme, a little scary theme from the opening slide or the opening video with the music. And my favorite color is green. So.
Where'd you get that video?
Envato videos, yeah. I had to pay $33 for it, but I downloaded it and I can cancel my sub and I still got the video, so we're good. But yeah, Envato has that. They have a handful of different ones. I was going to use one when I first did this talk, and it was a bloody hand, like slapping a glass, like a painted glass. And my partner was like, you probably shouldn't do that. Like, you might freak out a lot of people with that. So I opted not to, but that person wasn't that bad. What I'm going to be talking about today is all the new cool stuff you can do with CSS today in the browser. Some things, we're not there yet. It's coming. Trust me, it's coming. But a lot of the stuff you can do today, and it's fully supported, except in IE.
Which is dead now.
Which is dead now.
Rest in peace.
But is anybody still supporting it, like, within their org?
It's not totally dead, trust me.
A lot of places probably still do use it. I remember like kiosks, right? Like kiosks inside malls and stuff like that. All those run on IE. Or like internal intranets, if they haven't upgraded from Windows Vista, they might still be using IE 11. But all this stuff pretty much works in every browser, from Brave, Safari, Firefox, Chrome, and I'm a Firefox user. When I write code, I strictly use Firefox because of their dev tools. Their dev tools surpass anything that Chrome is doing, right? Do what? Yeah. You can do stuff with grid. You can do stuff with flex. You can do variable font sizing. You can do that inside Chrome's dev tools. The accessibility tooling, or in Firefox's dev tools, the accessibility tooling is really awesome as well. You can run color simulations, CVD simulations, color vision deficiency or color blindness, simulations in the dev tools so you can see what it looks like in the UI. So you don't need a third-party extension, which is really sweet. So we're going to talk a little bit about logical properties or logical props. Now there's a whole bunch of logical properties that you can use today. There's ones for width, there's ones for height, there's ones for borders, there's ones for margins, there's ones for paddings. We're trying to stop thinking in terms of width and height, top and bottom, right? We're trying to think logically on how the web is intrinsically going to handle these things. So I'm going to talk a little bit about block size and inline size, and this does get really confusing. Good support across the board, right? Except for this one right here. Opera Mini doesn't support anything. I don't even think Opera Mini is a thing anymore, and why it's still on Can I Use is beyond me. But we got good support. Chrome 103, Edge 103. The reason Chrome and Edge are on 103 is why? Chromium based, right, exactly. So that's cool. And one thing we have is block size. Now, I'm going to try not to run through this talk as quickly as I can. I'm going to try to give everybody 45, 50 minutes. But if we do get through it, then, it's all good. So what this is pretty much saying is depending on the way the writing mode is, when you're using block size, it will either equal width or it will equal height. That's very confusing because I have been writing front-end code for 26 years, and I am used to just width and height. Width and height. That's just the way it is. But based on language, because some, they read from right to left or top to bottom, you can specify with this how that container is going to handle that content. So this is just a test. I got a little bit of a code pen in here too. Hopefully the code gods will not mess me up. But you just set a block size on that. So depending on whether this is vertical writing mode or horizontal writing mode, the block size is going to be width or it's going to be height, and those can flip. And that's confusing. So I'm going to kind of run through what it looks like here. Hopefully it works. So we just have a wrapper. I'm not using a section because I don't really need to have a section. This is just throwaway from somebody's code pen. And so if I go into the CSS, can everybody see this? Sweet. Well, let's see here. We got a wrapper, block size. So with the inline, so let's change this to block size because this code pen is different. So the block size is 200, right? So what does that mean? Well, let's change it to 100 and see what happens. So now, based on the writing mode, it's the height that it's taking care of, block size. One thing you have to remember is that when it has a specific writing mode, and I think pretty much the default is horizontal, it's going to either be the width or the height. So if I were to put in here writing, I think it's writing mode, horizontal TB. Does that work? No. Let's go to here. Did I spell horizontal wrong? Go figure. Yeah, I did, didn't I? Horizontal, why is it there? I can't see it on my screen. Horizontal. And then, there we go. So you can see that depending on the writing mode, it's horizontal top to bottom. It's 100 pixels in height, right? So let's say we change this to vertical. That should switch it. It didn't. RTL. Nope, that's okay. Because the next one will explain that. So you can make this as big as you want. You can also use percentages. You can use like Vmax. You can use VW, VH. So then now that's 500. Does that make any sense? I'm still trying to, I've been doing this talk for almost a year and I'm still trying to process how these logical properties work. So if it's not clicking, don't even worry about it.
So if you edit the text, if you add like another word,
It could overflow, yeah, let's see.
or is the width going to change?
There we go.
500. It's a good question.
That is a great question. Let's see. Let's just add a bunch of stuff.
Still 500 height.
Yeah, let's see if we knock it down, what happens. Will it overflow? Nope. It's a good question. Yeah, so it'll be locked in at that pixel, and then you'll have an overflow. So you'd get around this with, using media queries, or you could use container queries nowadays. I haven't jumped into using container queries right now. I definitely want to start using them at work. But container queries get rid of the need to use media queries, which is pretty sweet from what I've seen. All right, come on, full screen. And we have inline size. Inline size sort of works the same way. Depending on the writing mode of the text, this will either be in width or it'll be a height. So, let me throw this up here. So in this one, we're setting the inline size to 50. We still have that background color, display of grid, just so I can center all the items. Is anybody using grid right now? Sweet. What about Flexbox? Cool. Why aren't you using grid? I'm just curious. Say it again?
Just haven't switched yet.
Just haven't switched yet? Oh, that's a valid answer. Is anybody using Bootstrap? Yeah? Bootstrap is good. Bootstrap does a lot of stuff. They adopted a lot of stuff first before other people, I would say other developers really got a grasp of it. Because before I was seeing a lot of grid, a lot of Flexbox in the wild, a lot of those responsive frameworks like Bootstrap, like Foundation, their newer versions of those were coming with those built in. So you could sort of see that already in the DOM. You could see that in the CSS. And it was really cool because people could use it. Now, am I a fan of Bootstrap? No. But every use case is different, especially if you work for a large enterprise company. I worked at a large enterprise company many years ago, and we used Bootstrap. Like at any given moment, somebody could have their hand in the code, and they need to know how to write it. That's just the way it is. Smaller places like smaller organizations, hand rolling your own is great. I'm a big believer in design systems. Anybody use design systems within their org? Design systems make everything great. As long as it has all the different pieces that make up a design system, language, UI components, accessibility, all of that stuff makes implementation of your components more streamlined. So this one is cool. So this is their inline sizing. So we got 50 pixels. So the way this works is that now the 50 pixels is being handled as a width. So like we could change it to 100, 10, 100. We can change it to 200. We could do writing mode. Let's try horizontal again, top to bottom. You could do vertical. What is it? Vertical, right to left. Let's take a look at MDN. Inline size. Here we go. So now, when you change it to right, vertical dash RL, now it's not going to be height anymore. It's going to be, well, it is going to be height. This is why it's confusing. It's probably easier just to show you this. We have an inline size of 150, writing mode horizontal top to bottom. So then the width, it's considered to be the width for the inline size. The second you change that writing mode, now it's going to be applied to the height. And block size is going to be width. So it really all depends on the writing mode that you're putting in your class, is how it's going to determine whether that inline or that block is going to be width or it's going to be height. So it's just one of those things to keep in mind. If you're using this in your CSS and you're wondering, why is this not working? Check your writing mode, and if there isn't one, put one in and see and try and debug your CSS that way.
So this is equivalent to how justifying content aligning items is merely flex direction of the column.
You can sort of think of it like that, yeah. Because depending on which way it is, flex direction would be, it would be essentially in a row, which would be the width, or the height, which would be the column.
Is writing mode inherited from the language tag on the HTML or something to that? Or? No.
That's a good question. I don't think so. I think you have to specifically put it in with your CSS in order to trigger the writing mode on how that text is going to be displayed. Is everybody cool with that?
Default,
Oh, let's see, what did it say? I believe the default, what did I read earlier? Well, let's see. If you were not to have a writing mode, the default of inline size would be the width. So it would just be the width value. Like I was saying, the other logical properties that you have, they can take care of your padding, your margin. You can set borders with these logical properties. There's a huge list of logical properties. If you're a fan of CSS tricks like I am, if you just go to CSS tricks or Google CSS logical properties, there's a huge list of things that you can do with logical properties today in the browser. I could do probably a whole talk on just the logical properties. Accent color is a fun one. Does anybody know what accent color is? I didn't know what accent color was until Adam Argyle. If you're not following Adam, definitely give Adam a follow. He was talking about it. He works at Google. He's a CSS developer advocate at Google. So he gets to work on all this cool stuff, getting it implemented into the browser, working on the dev tools so you can work with these things inside the dev tools and be able to change their values, their properties. It's a way to tint certain elements of your UI with one line of CSS, which is really sweet. Back in the day, you probably had to use JavaScript to do this, and if you need to use JavaScript to write your CSS, you're doing something wrong. Don't do that. The only problem is there's only 4 elements that you can put this on. And those elements that you can tint, and these is pretty much just all within a form, so they're form elements. You can tint the color of a checkbox, which is sweet. So now you don't have to make like custom JS to do this. You don't have to use images to do this anymore, right? Because all of that stuff is performance heavy. All of that stuff is performance heavy. Images, tons of JavaScript, because you have critical rendering path, blocking resources. You don't want to do that. Range, so you have range sliders. You can tint that, the actual range bar. You can tint radio buttons, so you can do any color you want. If you want to match branding, if you're building a form for your company, you want to match branding, you can open up that line of communication and collaboration with your design team and talk about ways that you can customize the elements within that form. And then progress bars. You can do progress bars too. Like I said, all of these are inside a form element. It also works with dark and light themes. So if you switch on a dark and a light theme, this will change and it will work for that experience. Good support across the board. Chrome, Edge, Safari, Firefox, Opera. Is anybody still using Opera? No? Okay. Follow up to that, how many are using Edge, like as a default development browser? Okay, neither am I. Chrome. Chrome Canary. Chromium. Okay, Firefox. Firefox Dev Edition. Firefox Nightly. Okay, a couple. Safari WebKit Preview. Safari? I heard Safari's the new IE, is that true?
No.
No? It is hard to do a lot of stuff though in Safari.
Edges.
Because if you don't know where to look in Safari to like figure out a responsive view or open up your dev tools, it is extremely difficult to navigate that UI. Cool. I just like to know who's using what. What about Brave? Is anybody using Brave?
No.
No?
It's a conversation between Todd and Chris at this point.
Cool.
It's great.
I got a question about iOS. So for people who don't use the iOS browser, or the Safari browser, you use Chrome, what image is that you, is that still Safari?
Yes.
Is it like a web view or is it something?
It's still web kit.
Yeah, it's still like a mobile WebKit for Safari. All of these everybody has a browser nowadays, right?
They're all clones of each other. They all have the same base underlying them. Like,
Yeah.
There's very little difference between browsers at this point.
No. Yeah. Everybody has a browser.
They're forks of each other.
Pretty much. I mean, if you really think about it, Chrome and Edge, everything forked off of WebKit or Gecko, which Gecko runs Firefox. Now Firefox is ran on top of Quantum. So like if you're a browser rendering engine nerd like me, that stuff is fascinating. But there's also a difference between the mobile browser or the web browser and a mobile browser. They're two different rendering engines. So you got to be careful with, like if something's failing in DevTools, like let's say Chrome DevTools for instance, if you have a piece of UI and it's broken, but it's not broken when you open up Chrome on a phone, there's a reason behind that. Different rendering engines based on mobile or desktop. Years ago, and the only reason I know that, years ago I was working for a company back in Detroit, and one of the rounded corners on an input or a button, it was a form element, it wasn't working at all. When it was being emulated or simulated, simulator and emulator are two different things, when it's being emulated in Chrome's DevTools, like an iPhone 5, because this was back in the day. Once I hooked up remote debugging to my iPhone and fired up Chrome, it looked just fine. So a whole shitload of stuff started to come down the hill from QA saying, oh, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. until I pulled out my phone and said, no, this is right. This is how it's supposed to look because this is a mobile browser. Different rendering engine. So that's just another thing to keep in mind. If something looks broken, it could be because of the rendering engine, right? What is everybody's primary source of, like, what's their dev machine? Who's Windows machines? Okay, what about Mac? What about Linux? Okay, sweet. If you don't have access to an iPhone, I would definitely suggest firing up Simulator on a Mac and testing it that way, because that browser inside the simulator for Safari is one-for-one with a physical device. Same with Android Studio. Like if you need to test an Android Studio using Chrome, that's usually one-for-one, because when you install all that stuff, you're matching the API, you're matching the device, you're matching the software that makes that physical device run. This is all you need. Accent dash color, hot pink or lime green. It's the only line of CSS you need in order to use accent color, if you're going to be doing that. So this one, it's hard, you can't really see this one. I don't know why, it's all wonky, but we just have labels, we have a field set, we have the range slider, we have some radio buttons, and a checkbox. So let's say this accent color, I don't even know.
Hopefully designers will stop making custom radio buttons.
Yeah, no, that's got to stop. That's got to stop.
Just for the color.
And let's, we don't really need this. Will this work? This will work. So yeah, I just changed with one line of CSS the accent color, lime green, and it changed the checkbox, the radio button, the sliders, and the progress bar, or the range bar. Now I can change it up here too. And why this color is not changing is beyond me. That's probably just because of the way it is. Give me a color, any color. Something that's accessible. There's cyan. What about blanched almond? That's a color. Blanched almond. That's what blanched almond looks like. Might look really good on like a sepia background, a black background.
Do they have a regular almond? So you can compare.
Yeah, that's your almond.
Not a raw almond or an almond.
How about mahogany?
Organic almond.
Mahogany. Is that what? I don't think that's a name. That's not a name color.
Yeah, that's a third, that's a D. M-A-G.
How am I not spelling this right?
D-Y.
It's D-Y? Mahogany. There's a D in mahogany? Are we sure?
Try it.
We'll never know. We'll never know.
Listen
Mahogany.
to him now.
Okay. Tell me how to spell it. M-A-H-O. Mahogany? Mahogany.
I think it's G-A-N-T-Y.
You guys are killing me.
Nobody Google anything.
Somebody Google mahogany and tell me how to spell the damn word. All right, you know what? We're just going to do this.
I mean, he hasn't tried mine yet.
Rebecca Purple. Give me another one. Rebecca Purple's a good one. Azure? Oh, yeah, that's a little bit. A little bit. Oh, no, that's not what I want to do. What do we got? Dark Azure?
Great contrast. I'm judging you right now.
I know you are. Yeah, don't do this ever in your code. Let's do red. Jazzberry jam? Shit. The snozberry. I just watched Willy Wonka the other day. Loved it. Jazzberry jam does sound dope though. Jazzberry.
These colors would probably name my console.
Blue. Salmon? Let's do salmon.
Pistachio green.
Pistachio green is one too?
No, I don't know. I think it's that.
You got a pack of Crayola in your bag? Oh, shit. All right, well, let's just go back to Rebecca Pearl.
We're just playing games at this point.
Yeah. But yeah, you can see you can change all these things. Well, not all these things, but these 4 things within a form, and it makes that form stand out way better than what the default is that you're being served up from the browser. Is anybody using aspect ratio? This is a good thing to use if you use a lot of imagery or photographs. It sets a preferred aspect ratio for the box. What does that mean? The box, the parent container, right? So it sets that aspect ratio so that image can size really, really well. Well, what does that even mean? Setting the box, the aspect ratio of the box. It helps to size consistently with images. Right? So you might have an image that is really tall, really long, and you need it to fit into a box. You can use aspect ratio to preserve all of that information. So how handy is it? Great question. I'm glad you asked. Responsive iframes, and yes, this is from documentation. I guess this still happens, responsive iframes. Especially if you are using third-party software to build, let's say this, how would I say this? Third-party software to build software that you are trying to ship. And what do I mean by doing that? I mean you are restricted to only using iframes in somebody else's product that you need to build code to fit inside their product. A great example of this is a company called Q2. Is anybody familiar with Q2? How many people have banking accounts or checking accounts with First Citizens Bank? Nobody? Okay. Q2 makes banking software. So if you buy into Q2, you get to use their software, and I've seen this because one of my banks has this. You get specific pieces of the UI that you can use, but you have to embed iframes or responsive iframes into that in order to use their software. Which, I mean, it's kind of cool if you look at it, but anytime you go into your bank and you see like your bank name and you have like navigation on the side and you might have like little components that say checking account or savings account, chances are your bank is using Q2 to build that checking and saving account software. Just your account software. It's really cool. Hero images. Hero images are huge. They're still big. Hero images blew up with the advent of Bootstrap, like OG Bootstrap, when you had the Jumbotron, right? People started putting images into that. Well, now you can do that, keep the aspect ratio of that image using this CSS. And then grid layouts, a favorite of mine. You can use aspect ratio to lay out certain things within your grid. Does anybody follow Jen Simmons on Twitter? Okay, so Jen Simmons does a lot of work with Grid and Flexbox. She's not the only one. Rachel Andrew also does a lot of work with Grid and Flexbox. Miriam Suzanne does a lot of work with Grid and Flexbox. Jen has a lot of demos showing placing things on the grid, both in rows and in columns. Right? So let's say you have an image and you need to put an image here, and maybe an image here, and an image here. You can use aspect ratio to keep that looking crisp and clean and not have to use image 100%. You can use aspect ratio of that container to consistently size that image within it. Once again, great support across the board. I love seeing this. There was a time when a lot of stuff did not have support, right? We were waiting for Grid to get through. We were waiting for Flexbox to have full support across the browser, because if not, you had to worry about progressive enhancement and graceful degradation and at supports. Like, you can still use at supports today, but chances are you're not going to need at supports if you're using a browser. So I mean, if you're all the way down to, you're still like 84, 87 to Chrome, 3.1 Safari, 83, 88 of Firefox, you might need at supports because it's not going to support this. Your user base will not be able to see this stuff. So then you'd have to fall back and do custom work that your designers give you. But if you can use ad supports, always use ad supports just to make your stuff future friendly. I don't like saying future proof, because you can never have anything that's future-proof. The web moves too fast, right? You want to be future-friendly. There's a bunch of different ways you can use this. Aspect ratio 1:1, so the width and height are equal in proportion. 2:1, the width is twice the height, so this side of the slash is width and this side is height. Aspect ratio 1:2, so the width is going to be half of the height. And then 16:9, that's like typical video. Usually slide decks like PowerPoint, Keynote, those are usually like 16:9. You have auto, and you also have your global values. A lot of things in CSS usually have a global value. Inherit, initial, and unset. So hopefully you're not having to go through all your CSS and starting like to unset a bunch of stuff. Who does CSS mobile first? Who does CSS desktop first? I used to be in that camp of doing desktop first. Why? Because if you're on a desktop, everything you need that user to see is in front of you, right? So of course, what are you going to do? You're going to design desktop first. Then you start taking stuff away as you're moving into mobile. What started happening with projects I'm working on is that we are using a design system, and that design system is based off a set of media queries. So going from the bottom to the top was a lot less painful than going from top down. It made things a lot more seamless, especially if you're into like writing functions and mixins and Sass, to take care of those viewports and just have everything that you do need within your mobile breakpoint, which by default you don't write a breakpoint for your mobile view. It's everything will be in one column, and then work your way up from there. But when you start getting into using unset is when you're going like desktop down, and now you're trying to unset stuff to be at maximum widths and not min widths, and it can get a little hectic.
Is aspect ratio always horizontal and then vertical? It doesn't change like inline and block?
It shouldn't, no.
Okay.
No. So this one right here, aspect ratio 16:9. I think this was the default. It's like if we were to do 1:1, the width and height are going to be the same. Both equal in size. If we were to do 2:1, now that width is longer than that height, but it's still preserving that image. So like let's say you have a hero image, and that hero image container is 25 VH. Is anybody using VW and VH? Cool. It was 25 VH, now it's going to keep that aspect ratio within that container, right? And then you can switch it around. You could do, let's see what happens if we do 1 and 2. It should go, yeah. So now the height is bigger than the width, but it still preserves that aspect ratio. So.
Is this doing a crop or is it actually changing the image itself?
There's a lot of math behind what's happening in the browser with aspect ratio. So, but it's taking that image and it's sizing it consistently based on the container itself. So there is some math behind it. I wouldn't know how to answer that math question, but I can direct you to the person that does.
I think you scroll up, you see that the building kind of got cut off a little bit. So I was wondering that too. It's like the different TV if you switch twice.
Oh yeah, well, let me see.
So go back to like 2-1.
Let's do 2-1.
We'll see one.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I see what you're saying.
So it was like a TV.
Right. That is a great question. I'm going to have to ask Adam.
Might be because of the background size cover.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. That might be it. Let's see.
Yeah.
But it might be default covered.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I will have to ask Adam for sure. But the general gist is there, right?
Yeah, but you're also doing like, yeah.
Right.
It doesn't look like it's storing the image, it looks like it's cropping it according to
Yeah.
aspect ratio.
I will ask Adam that. I'll see why that's happening. He might even know why. Even though it's fully supported, there's always bugs. There's always bugs in our software. So Is anybody familiar with marker? Where are you going, Taylor?
You ready to set up?
My man. Make sure you go to Taylor's talk after mine.
Yeah.
This is kind of, you might never need this, but it's just one of those cool things. You can customize the marker of your ordered and your unordered lists, right? So you just don't need a dot anymore, right? Or a 1, 2, 3, whatever the case may be. Once again, full support. I have to show the support of this stuff. Is anybody using Can I Use? That should be your go-to book for anything that you are doing on the web, especially if you have questions, whether it's markup, JavaScript, or CSS. CanIUse.com should be a bookmark. But I have to show you support because it's very important to know what is going to work, what's not going to work. I did this talk in November of last year, and some of this stuff wasn't even fully supported yet. So when I was doing demos, I had a demo in a browser that was supported because it would break in, let's say, an older version of Chrome. Showing support for this stuff is key in understanding how it's going to work. And Can I Use also will tell you known issues, what you need to run behind a feature flag, if that's the case. So always use Can I Use. This is how it works. You have a list item, you got your pseudo element marker, and then you pass it in content. And this is how it works. That's it. That's literally all it does. Let me bump this up a little bit so everybody can see it. 2 RAM. There. All I'm doing is changing the marker for like a custom something. You can use an image, you can use emoji, whatever you want to do. I think it's fun. Let's say you are building like a haunted house website, which I use for my accessibility workshops. This is cute and fun, right? Haunted houses are not horrible, but I told you I believe in ghosts, Bigfoot, and UFOs. So, but you can use this today. So you want to have a little fun, go back to work, put it in, push it to a preview branch. Like I did it. What? Put some pumpkins in there. It's all good. Get off of that. Where it is. This is another really, really cool feature that you can use today. Is anybody familiar with where it is? Okay, sweet. Where is a pseudo class function. It takes a selector list and it will apply anything that you are saying to that argument that's in that list. You get the gist. Everything is pretty much supported. So what this is saying is it's saying where the header, the main, and the footer all have a paragraph of hover, add this stuff right here. Color hot pink, font weight bold, cursor pointer. So that translates into this. Header with a paragraph of hover, main, the paragraphs have a hover, and the footer, they all have a one. And then this is not right, color red, but that's how it breaks down when you're writing CSS. If you want all of these things where this equals true, then you're going to have that, take that in your CSS, and it will compile down to that. So this is cool. We just have a couple paragraphs in here. And in here I'm saying where the header, main, footer has that paragraph of hover. I want that color of hot pink. I want it to change to bold, and I want the cursor to be a pointer. Right? So all 3 of these paragraphs take this on, because what it will break down to is what I showed here, except it's not red, it's this stuff right here. Does that make sense? That's pretty sweet. There's another one. It's called is. Now, I could read the same thing to you. Function that takes a selector as its argument, selects the element that can be selected, and does all those things to those things that are in the parentheses. Sounds the same. You get the gist. Really, really good support. Pseudo class, CSS. Now this is how this works. So if the header, main, the footer have paragraphs and you want them to hover, you want something to happen on hover, header, paragraph with a hover. So we have red pointer. So I think this and this looks the exact same as where, right? Looks exactly the same. And it sort of is. Just like what we did with where. But, why are they the same? Why do they look the same visually? Syntactically, they look the same. Do we all agree? They're different. They are. They're different. It's true. The is pseudoclass is based on specificity. Where is not based on specificity. Now, if I had to guess, if you don't like CSS, one of the reasons why you don't like CSS is the specificity. I fully understand that. This can trip you up if you don't understand the differences. When syntactically they look the same, the difference is based on the specificity of that element. This will differ based on that. And I will show you. We have the is with the section and the article, aside, nav. We're just throwing everything in there. This is semantic markup, by the way. Section, article, aside, nav. Semantic markup by default is accessible. Don't use divs. You might see some divs in these examples. That's fine. This is not going out into production. This isn't for a client. Do not use divs. Stop doing that shit. Use semantic markup first. Once you expend all of that, then start using divs and add in your ARIA roles when you have to do it. First rule of ARIA, don't use ARIA. ARIA stands for Accessible Rich Internet Applications. It's sort of the frosting on top of the HTML to make it more accessible, your code more accessible to users with assistive technology. So don't do any of that stuff. Use semantic markup first, then get into divs. If you need ARIA at that point, then put in your ARIA. So what I'm saying here is we have a font size of 25 pixels, color purple, font weight bold, right? So we see that here, but there's nothing here. But this H1 is right here, font size 30 pixels. But it's still, you know, the default color. That's because this right here is taking the specificity and applying the is. So change to red. So that's how that works. So if you're going to be using where and is, just make sure that you're keeping in mind the specificity of this code, or the code that you're writing in CSS, and whether or not it's going to take on those properties. Does that make sense? Sweet. Focus. This is a huge one. This is all accessibility related right here. I give a talk on focus. It's called Focus Styles and Accessibility. I also give a talk on low vision. I do an accessibility workshop. I do a talk on accessibility and ROI and how that plays a huge role in your organization, whether or not you're going to get sued. A focus is the visual indicator that somebody's interacting with something on the page. Button, input, a link. Sometimes you'll see focus of the outline of the focus set to 0 or none. Don't do that. Never do that. If it's like that right now, you need to go into your code base and change it, remove it, because if you remove focus for one person, you remove focus for everybody. Your keyboard users, your Braille machine users, anybody that's coming through assistive technology, even just your regular everyday user. Accessibility benefits everybody, not just people with disabilities and impairments. So don't remove the focus. And if your design team or your marketing team is like, well, that looks ugly, I don't like that ring around that button, time out, pump the brakes, have a conversation. Because you can style all of those things. You can match branding. You don't have to use what's provided by the user agent. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. Focus within is really cool. If you're not following Una Kravitz on Twitter, definitely follow Una. I found out about this a few years ago. And the way this works is that you can set a focus within pseudoclass on a parent element like a form, and you can change the background, you can change the color of the text, etc. So you know when you are focusing to that element, you know that's where you're at within that element. It's like if I were to click here, I just use a tab to tab into that. That whole entire section has focus now. I know where I'm at. I'm not going to get lost in this experience. This is really, really cool to start using. Another fun one, and this is a little bit older, Focus Visible. If you're familiar with Focus Visible and the polyfill that was out there, this used to be a pain in the ass to implement because you have to use JavaScript, a little bit of CSS. It wasn't fully supported, but the amazing engineers at Google busted their asses to get this fully supported in the browser. You can use it in the browser today, all across the board. And the way Focus Visible works is sort of just like Focus Within. You add a pseudo class to an element that you want to have this on. Right here, I'm setting the outline to 2 pixels, dash, line green, and the outline offset, so it'll offset it a little bit. And the way this works is awesome. So Focus Visible is based on heuristics. So the browser knows whether you're coming in from a mouse, a trackpad, or the keyboard only, and will remove or set that focus ring back. Apparently, the story I've heard is that a bunch of developers were upset because they had a focus ring using a mouse, and they bitched and said, I don't need to see where I'm at in this experience. I can physically click it. I know what I'm doing. This was kind of bred out of that. So what happens is, let's say if I go and use my trackpad, and I click on this button, I'm clicking on it all day. There's no focus ring. But now, let's say I tab to this experience. They're getting down. I like that. They're getting down. Now the focus ring is set back because I came directly from the keyboard. I'm using the keyboard to navigate the experience. Really powerful stuff if you're using it in production today. And if you're not using it in production, bring it up. Say, hey, I saw this awesome thing at this conference. I think we should start using it. I've had people come up to me after a conference talk and do that. Brought their machine to me and said, hey, check out this PR. I just put this PR in my organization because I think this is great and we need it. You have to keep accessibility at the forefront of what you're building. Accessibility matters a whole hell of a lot. The 3 things that always are put on the back burner that are under the umbrella of UX: accessibility, security, performance. Nobody gives a shit about either one of those till shit hits the fan. That has to stop. Right now. That has to stop. Go back, try and use this, and see how it is. I got a couple more minutes left. I want to talk a little bit about nesting. SAS use, anybody writing SAS? Anybody writing less? I don't think less even is around anymore. What about stylus? No, cool. Nobody knows it's stylus. Good. You can do this in SAS. You can do nesting. That's why I love writing SAS, but we don't have the support. I don't know when we're going to get the support. There's a lot of talk about it, but it provides the ability to nest rules, just like SAS does, right? You can do it natively in the browser, so you won't have to use SAS anymore. Now, there's a lot of great things that SAS provides, functions, calculations, etc. But with CSS custom properties, which are CSS variables, you don't need SAS anymore. When nesting hits, you don't need SAS anymore, if that's just what you're doing. Because SAS variables are compiled before runtime. If you were to use regular variables, you can target them with JavaScript, you can change them on the fly, etc. This is how this would look. If you have the instructors, a class of instructors, a class of instructors inside with a class of instructor inside it, that would break down just like how you would normally see if you were writing SAS or writing SCSS. We have gradient shadows. These are really cool. You can set shadows to be a gradient, like a box shadow, right? Using logical properties to set the height and the width. And this is the CSS that makes it happen. And you can change all this stuff. Definitely follow Adam Argyle if you're not following him. He puts his code pens out there. All his stuff is out there that he's working on. Really, really kind of cool. If you change things around, you can change the colors. He's using HSL. If you're not familiar with HSL, it's just a way to do color, hue, saturation, and lightness. You can use RGB. You can use hex. Really cool stuff. We also have conic gradients. This was never supported. Leah Varro did a lot of talk about this way back in the day. Now they're fully supported, which is great. This is how you make that happen. Conic gradient, you want to specify the direction from 90 degrees at 50% to 125% and set these color values. So essentially, you could make pie charts with CSS now. If you don't need them to be interactive, you can make pie charts. And this is pretty much a conic gradient. You can make this into a circle, but you can see that around is the gradient. It goes up this way. So it's a circle right through here. There's a book that Leah Veru wrote years ago. I forgot the name of it. It's slipping my mind. But she does talk about this. Definitely give conic gradients a Google, and you'll see all the cool stuff that you can do with it. You can do really, really amazing stuff with CSS today. Conic gradient border, this is another one. Inline size, block size, these logical properties that we talked about. Border image, radial gradient, linear. And then this is how that works. So you can set a conic gradient around a border now instead of just a solid color. That is sweet. And you pair that with a gradient drop shadow, like you could really make elements pop. Subgrid, we're almost there. Firefox does support it, so that's cool. I think it's coming. It's nesting a grid within a grid. That's what subgrid is, nesting a grid within a grid if you're using grid. Damn, that sounds sweet. There's a lot of sweet stuff that you could do when you have that tool behind you. Columns. Oh shit, let me go back. Columns. So like this, you can set a grid, and then your grid can be inside that grid. Now this was shown in Firefox because it's supported in Firefox. Let's see. You can also do subgrid with rows. So you can lay a row on top of a row, like a piece on top of the part of the grid that's the row. You can have overlapping stuff, so you can make a bunch of really dope things. My time is up. Here's some resources if you want to take a picture of it. It's at a bit.ly, bit.ly/it came from the browser. If you want to take a flick of this, I'll give you like 5 seconds, because my lift is going to be here in like 8 minutes. Follow all of these people: Adam Argyle, Miriam Suzanne, Jen Simmons, Mochada Sadie, Una Kravitz, and Rachel Andrew if you want to know all of the latest and greatest amazing things you can do in CSS. If it wasn't for any of them, and even the OGs in the CSS game, Hakim Wam Lee, everybody, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. So that's my time, and thank you so much for being here.